you think sawtooth sharks are scary? That's right. Do you think the Leviathan is the top predator in the sea? That's not wrong either. Do you think the azure dragon is invincible? Completely correct. But I want to tell you a terrifying fact. 470 million years ago, their ancestors would only do one thing if they encountered such a creature: silently pray that it wouldn't be hungry. It was the only creature in that era that didn't need to avoid anything. Even more horrifyingly, paleontologists have a hypothesis that this creature was so ruthless that it forced early fish to evolve desperately. It forced them to develop faster speeds, stronger skeletons, and smarter brains. Later on, these fish crawled onto land, stood upright, learned to use fire, created mobile phones, and began scrolling through short videos. The wisdom you have now, your bones, your nervous system, part of it was forced out by it. Bite by bite. It is your ancestor, humanity's most feared enemy, and the earliest creator of human civilization. It is called the defensive keystone. If you think this is absurd, please listen to this audio and see if it can evoke a hint of fear in you. Its story is crazier than any monster movie. Let's rewind time to 470 million years ago. Notice the number 470 million years. How vast is that? Dinosaurs appeared only 230 million years ago, and humans have existed for just a few million years. At that time, the defensive keystone was already the ruler of Earth. The Earth back then had nothing on land. No trees, no grass, not even insects. All life and all stories occurred in the sea. The most numerous creatures in the ocean were trilobites, a type of small creature covered in a hard shell, made up 60% of the total marine life at that time. They lived on Earth for a full 300 million years, making them the most enduring life form in history. But they lived their entire lives in constant fear because there was something in the sea that haunted their dreams, the defensive keystone. When you see it for the first time, you may be taken aback because it looks like a giant ice cream cone. A straight conical hard shell tapers to a point and extends nearly 6 meters long. 6 meters is the length of a medium-sized bus, but that's just its shell, head, and tentacles. No one knows exactly how long it is. Scientists estimate, based on the proportions of modern squids, that the tentacles and head together could be longer than the shell. This means that the monster in front of you could potentially exceed 10 meters in length. So how does it break rocks? Here's a detail that surprises many. The mimic octopus does not chase its prey. The shell is too heavy and too long. Chasing is simply not realistic. It chooses places in the crevices of the reef. It just hangs there, completely still. The tentacles dangle lazily at the edge of the crevice, like a few strands of seaweed drifting in the water. There is no scent of any predator. The three-leaf bug doesn't know and continues to crawl slowly along the reef wall, searching for dates, looking for food, doing what it does every day. It has never realized that those strands of seaweed have been sensing the vibrations of every step it takes, getting closer and closer. In the next second, the tentacles strike, pulling out a few chains from the seam, hissing as they fixate on it. The three-leaf bug's hard shell is useless. The hard shell during the attack will extend, biting down like industrial scissors. The hard shell will shatter, and the same food will constantly be refined, with remnants of shell, mucus, and flesh scattered around the reef. Then, the Aranda fish appears. This little creature, only a few centimeters long and covered in a hard shell, is something the mimic octopus disdainfully overlooks. It follows behind, scavenging for crab scraps, living cautiously in the shadow of the giant beast. But do you know where the most absurd part of this story lies? That little scavenger eventually evolved into fish, evolved into amphibians, evolved into reptiles, and finally evolved into mammals, evolving into you. At this point, I must tell a story that makes me feel nature has truly bizarre designs. The shell of the mimic octopus is not solid. Inside it is divided into individual chambers, and between the chambers, there is a thin tube that runs through, called a siphon. The defense angle stone precisely controls its buoyancy and depth in water by adjusting the ratio of gas and liquid in each chamber. This is a natural, fully automated submarine balancing system. It existed 470 million years ago, while humans only created truly practical submarines at the end of the 19th century. Nature had anticipated this nearly 500 million years earlier. Now, let's talk about the most brutal part. How did such a powerful creature disappear? 443 million years ago, at the end of the Ordovician period, the Earth suddenly changed. The mainstream scientific explanation is that the Gondwana continent drifted near the South Pole, causing a dramatic global climate change, with glaciers expanding on a large scale and sea levels suddenly dropping. The warm, shallow sea where the defense angle stone lived disappeared, not gradually shrinking, but directly vanishing. This disaster wiped out 85% of marine species on Earth. This event is referred to as the Great Ordovician Mass Extinction. It was the second most catastrophic biological extinction event in Earth's history, and the defense angle stone disappeared forever from the fossil record in this disaster. But the story isn't over, because the next twist is what really gives me goosebumps. The defense angle stone died, but its relatives, the head toxic animals, had two lineages that survived this extinction. These two survivors later evolved into all the head family species we see in today's oceans: parrots, octopuses, cuttlefish, and squids. Yes, that squid you eat at barbecues. Its ancestor was once the most fearsome existence on this planet. 470 million years ago, you dip it in sauce and eat it, and the descendants of kings have fallen to this. I don't know whether to say that purification is brutal or humanity is formidable. There's one last detail that many people don't know, but I think it's the most shocking part of the defense angle stone story. Paleontologists have a hypothesis that the existence of giant predators like the defense angle stone might have unintentionally rewritten the entire evolutionary fate of vertebrates. During the Ordovician period, the ancestors of fish were still very fragile, with simple skeletons, slow speeds, and poor sensory abilities. Faced with predation, they had only one path: to grow stronger or to die. As a result, the pressure from predation forced early fish to develop lighter skeletons, more advanced muscles, and more sensitive nervous systems. Later on, the descendants of these fish crawled onto land. After a very long time, they stood upright, learned to use fire, built submarines, and began to study the creature that lived in the sea 470 million years ago. The cornerstones, while consuming our ancestors, also shaped us into what we are today, bite by bite. They are our enemies, but also our creators. So you see, extinction is never the end point. The cornerstones disappeared 400 million years ago, but their genes are still swimming on your skewers tonight, and the fear they instilled is etched into your bones. A species can rule for tens of millions of years, only to see entire oceans reshuffled. The disappearance of the strong is never the conclusion of the story, rather, it is where other lives truly begin. The reason you can think today, can perceive, and can marvel at a fossil is not that your ancestors were lucky enough, but because they were scared enough. 250 million years ago, it was a desert with oxygen levels only half of what they are today. Walking a few steps left one gasping, and the sky was orange-red, while the ground was mostly charred. In this kind of place, one animal completed the most important evolution in Earth's history. It was not whales returning to the ocean, nor birds flying into the sky, but rather a leg changing its position. This single action rewrote the entire history of the Earth. 230 million years ago, in a barren land in Argentina, there was an animal running around on the ground, measuring less than 1.5 meters in length and weighing about 10 kilograms. It had thin legs and a small head, running like a large-sized chicken. This was one of the earliest known dinosaurs, Orthoceras. It was not a top predator. It couldn't even rank in the food chain, feeding on lizards, small reptiles, and plants, and sometimes possibly competing with other animals for carrion. Who was the true ruler on land during that period? It was a guy called the Lord's Evil, over 6 meters long, weighing 30 times that of a stegosaurus, with sturdy limbs. The stegosaurus could run as far as it could when it encountered it. So, now you know what the situation was when dinosaurs first appeared, right? They were the weak, utterly weak. Let's push the time forward a bit. 252 million years ago, the most catastrophic mass extinction in history occurred. The Permian extinction. It wiped out about 96% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrates, all of which disappeared. Scientists call it the Great Dying. The surviving creatures faced not new opportunities, but a charred wasteland. What was Earth like back then? All the continents were still connected, called the Pangea. The volcano erupts everywhere, the sky is orange-red, and the land is largely desert. In such a place, life began a long process of rebuilding. The first to rise was an animal called the water dragon, a mix between a pig and a hippopotamus, with a pair of downward curving tusks, eating anything without being picky, and digging holes to avoid extreme heat. At one point, they accounted for 75% of the terrestrial vertebrate population, and almost all that roamed the early Triassic were them. But the good days of the water dragon did not last long, as new competitors arrived. The protagonists are a group of reptiles called pseudo-crocodiles, also known as false crocodiles. Note that these are not true crocodiles. They are just distant relatives of crocodiles, but they look even more like crocodiles and are more formidable than crocodiles. The fiercest among them are the members of the Labyrinthodontia, measuring 6 to 9 meters in length, with strong and robust limbs. Unlike modern crocodiles that lie flat, they run in an almost upright position. In that era, they were the top of the terrestrial food chain, and no creature dared to provoke them. At this time, the thieves were shrinking in the corners, relying on their small size and quick recovery to survive in the cracks. About 20 million years passed like this, and no one could have imagined that the situation would reverse. Have you ever closely observed how modern crocodiles walk? Their limbs extend to the sides, and their bellies nearly touch the ground. With every step, the whole body sways left and right. Breathing and walking interfere with each other, and after a few steps, they must stop to catch their breath. Although the top predator at the time, the Labyrinthodontia, had already solved the walking efficiency problem by having legs directly beneath their bodies, they still had not overcome the limitations of breathing. Dinosaurs were different. Dinosaurs not only had legs directly beneath their bodies for upright support, but also evolved a system of air sacs that permeated their bodies, which later became the prototype for the dual breathing system in birds. This means that they can run without their breathing being disturbed by the body's movements. A single breath can provide double the oxygen, and similarly, a meal allows them to run farther, chase longer, and expend less energy. In the late Triassic period, in an environment of low nutrition and food scarcity, this represents the true life and death gap. Moreover, upright walking liberated the forelimbs, and efficient breathing provided a foundation for high-energy flight. Later, the theropods could hunt with their sickle-shaped claws, and the birds could fly into the sky. This logical chain began to be laid down from this step in the Triassic period. Yet even with this advantage, dinosaurs still could not compete with the Orthoceras until nature itself intervened. 201 million years ago, the Pangaea continent began to split apart. The division of the continent was not an overnight affair, but with the rifting, supervolcanoes began erupting on a large scale, covering an area of over 1.1 million square kilometers and continued erupting for about 600,000 years. This is the famous Central Atlantic Magmatic Province event in geological history. What were the consequences? Carbon dioxide levels surged, global warming occurred, ocean acidification set in, leading to massive die-offs, and the food chain began to collapse from the bottom up. The end Triassic extinction event killed off 76% of Earth's species, including the Orthoceras. The top predators among the Orthoceras were almost entirely wiped out. All those colossal creatures that loomed over the dinosaurs disappeared. Yet the dinosaurs survived. Why did the dinosaurs manage to survive? It was not a coincidence. Scientists have discovered several key reasons why dinosaurs survived this extinction event. First, a large number of dinosaurs were distributed in high-latitude regions far from the extreme heat zones of the equator. Fossil evidence shows that as early as the early Triassic, dinosaurs had already spread into the cold regions of high latitudes and evolved features that adapted them to low temperatures, indicating they could survive in environments beyond just the tropics. Second, early dinosaurs may have already developed primitive fibrous insulation structures akin to the precursors of feathers. The volcanic eruptions brought about a volcanic winter that caused temperatures to plummet, and this insulating structure allowed them to endure the sudden cold. Thirdly, the strong adaptability of reality and the digestive system. The reality of early dinosaurs was highly generalized, with many mixed species that could adapt to the scarce food resources after disasters. Whether it was the rapidly recovering ferns, snail plants, or small animals and carrion, they could all utilize the edible resources found in the apocalypse, and they could digest them. When disaster strikes, the first of all are those who are overly specialized in a particular environment. Dinosaurs, on the other hand, were the kind of creatures that could make do with anything and survive in any environment. After all competitors were eliminated, the entire ecological niche of the Earth suddenly became vacant. The positions of large herbivores and top predators were empty, and opportunities were everywhere, in icy waters, forests, and open lands. Dinosaurs began to expand explosively, growing larger and more diverse, moving towards a dominance that would last for the next 135 million years. This is the prologue to the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. Every time I study this period of history, I think of one thing. For the 20 million years after their birth, dinosaurs were always the weak ones, oppressed and chased, living in corners. But they did not perish under oppression. Instead, they honed themselves into a blade. By the time that disaster wiped out all the strong, they were already prepared. The 4.6 billion years of Earth's history repeatedly tells us one thing. The truly fearsome are never those who are strongest at this moment, but rather those who are. In the most difficult times, it is not the ones who have given up on evolving themselves. Eras will change, the strong will fall, but those lives that have been quietly accumulating strength in the shadows will eventually wait for their own time. In the next episode, we will enter the true golden age of dinosaurs in the Jurassic period.